What would you do if a message from the heavens came through the voice of a child? Would you listen or dismiss it as fantasy? Tonight I'm going to share with you a story that will challenge everything you think you know about the invisible world that surrounds us. This is a true account of how one mother's choice to trust her daughter's imaginary friend saved her entire family from certain death. But before we begin, I need you to do something for me. Tell us in the comments what you would do if your child came to you with a warning from someone only they could see. Would you believe them? And please, let us know which city you're watching from tonight. If you believe that angels speak to us in whispers, through the voices of those we least expect, then subscribe to our channel right now. You won't want to miss what happens next. It was a Thursday evening in late September, and the Morrison family home glowed with warm light against the deepening twilight. Inside the modest but comfortable two-story house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, Chloe Morrison moved through her nightly routine with the practiced efficiency of a mother who had done this 1,000 times before. At 32 years old, Chloe was the kind of woman who kept color-coded calendars, prepared lunches the night before, and believed that structure and rationality were the foundations of a good life. Her daughter, Maya, was 6 years old, with dark curls that bounced when she laughed, and eyes that seemed to notice things that adults had long ago stopped seeing. Maya was in that magical age where imagination and reality blurred together, where stuffed animals had personalities and shadows could become dragons. For the past 3 months, Maya had been talking about her imaginary friend, Nathaniel. At first, Chloe had found it charming. Every child had an imaginary friend at some point, didn't they? But lately, Nathaniel's presence in their home had become more pronounced, more insistent, and frankly, more annoying. Chloe climbed the stairs to Maya's bedroom, carrying a glass of water and her daughter's favorite stuffed rabbit. The house creaked in that familiar way old houses do, settling into the coolness of the evening. She could hear her husband, Ben, downstairs in his home office typing away on his laptop. Ben was an engineer, a man who lived by facts, figures, and the concrete laws of physics. He had even less patience for Maya's imaginary friend than Chloe did. When Chloe pushed open Maya's bedroom door, she found her daughter sitting cross-legged on her bed, apparently having an animated conversation with the empty air beside her window. The curtains swayed gently, though Chloe was certain she had closed the window earlier. "Time for bed, sweetheart," Chloe said, setting the water on the nightstand. Maya turned to her mother, her expression suddenly serious in a way that seemed far too old for her years. "Mommy, Nathaniel says we have to check the basement before we go to sleep. It's very important. He says the breathing wall is making a funny smell, and we need to be careful." Chloe felt a familiar wave of exhaustion wash over her. It had been a long day. She had worked 8 hours at the medical office where she managed patient records, then rushed to pick up Maya from school, helped with homework, prepared dinner, cleaned the kitchen, and now all she wanted was to get her daughter to sleep so she could have 1 hour of peace before her own bedtime. "Maya, honey, we've talked about this. Nathaniel isn't real. He's just your imagination. The basement is fine. I'm sure everything is perfectly safe." But Maya's face crumpled, and tears began to well up in her eyes. "But Mommy, he's standing right there. Can't you see him? He's made of sunshine, and he's really, really worried about us. He says the breathing wall is important." Chloe sat down on the edge of Maya's bed, trying to summon patience she didn't quite feel. "What's a breathing wall, sweetie?" "The wall in the basement that goes in and out when it breathes," Maya explained, as if this should be perfectly obvious. "Nathaniel can see inside it, and he says something is broken. He says there's a bad smell, like the stuff in Daddy's garage that he says we should never touch." "Maya, walls don't breathe. That's just your imagination. Now, I need you to lie down, close your eyes and go to sleep. It's already past your bedtime." "But Nathaniel says—" "That's enough about Nathaniel." Chloe's voice came out sharper than she intended. She immediately felt guilty when she saw Maya flinch. Taking a breath, she softened her tone. "I'm sorry, baby. Mommy's just very tired. How about this? I'll go down and take a quick look at the basement, just to make you feel better. Okay?" Maya nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Nathaniel says thank you. He says you're being very brave." Chloe kissed her daughter's forehead, tucked the covers around her small body, and turned on the nightlight that projected stars across the ceiling. "I'll be right back. You stay in bed." As Chloe walked down the hallway toward the stairs, she felt foolish. She was a grown woman about to inspect her basement because her 6-year-old daughter's imaginary friend had told her to. But something nagged at her, a small whisper of intuition that she couldn't quite silence. Maya had been so specific, so insistent, And there had been other moments over the past few weeks, other warnings from Nathaniel that had seemed odd. Just 2 days ago, Maya had refused to let Chloe start the car until she checked the tires. "Nathaniel says the front left one looks wobbly," she had said. Chloe had humored her daughter and discovered that the lug nuts on that tire were indeed loose, dangerously so. The mechanic later told her the wheel could have come off while she was driving. Then there was the incident with the toaster. Maya had told her that Nathaniel said they shouldn't use it because it was too hot inside. Chloe had dismissed it, but when Ben plugged it in the next morning, smoke had poured out and the kitchen fire alarm had gone off. The toaster's wiring had been faulty, on the verge of causing an electrical fire. Coincidences, Chloe had told herself. Lucky guesses. Children picked up on things adults didn't notice, that was all. But now, as Chloe reached the basement door at the end of the first-floor hallway, something made her pause. The house felt different somehow, as if the very air had changed its texture. She placed her hand on the doorknob and was about to turn it when a gust of wind rushed through the hallway, strong enough to make her hair whip across her face. That was impossible. All the windows were closed. She had checked them herself as part of her evening routine. The candle she had lit earlier on the hallway table flickered violently and then went out, leaving a thin trail of smoke curling upward in the darkness. Chloe stood frozen, her hand still on the doorknob, her heart suddenly beating faster. For a moment, just a moment, she felt as if someone was standing right behind her, someone tall and powerful and radiant, someone who was trying very hard to get her attention. She spun around, but the hallway was empty. "Get a grip, Chloe," she muttered to herself. She was letting Maya's imagination get to her. That was all. She opened the basement door. The smell hit her immediately, faint but distinct, a sweet, chemical odor that didn't belong. Chloe reached for the light switch and flipped it up. Nothing. The basement remained in darkness. "Of course," she sighed. "The bulb must have burned out." Using her phone's flashlight, Chloe descended the wooden stairs into the basement. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating boxes of Christmas decorations, old furniture, and the furnace that sat squat and silent in the corner. The basement was unfinished, with exposed wooden beams and drywall covering the foundation walls. It smelled musty the way basements always do, but underneath that familiar scent was something else, something sweeter and more acrid. Chloe swept her phone light across the walls, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Everything seemed fine. The furnace looked normal. The walls were intact. There were no obvious leaks, no signs of damage. "The breathing wall," she murmured, remembering Maya's odd phrase. She approached the wall opposite the stairs, where the gas line ran behind the drywall to feed the furnace and water heater. She pressed her hand against the wall. It felt normal, solid, and cool. She put her ear against it. Nothing. But that smell, it was stronger here. Definitely stronger. Chloe straightened up, frowning. She should probably mention this to Ben. He would know what to do. He always knew what to do. That was one of the things she loved about him, his unshakable confidence in the rational world. She climbed back up the stairs, closed the basement door, and went to find her husband. Ben was still in his office, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his computer screen. He looked up when she entered, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Everything okay?" he asked. "I'm not sure. Maya's been going on about the basement again. Something about a funny smell and a breathing wall. I went down to check, and there is a smell, Ben, kind of sweet and chemical, and the light down there isn't working." Ben leaned back in his chair, a patient smile on his face. "Honey, the light bulb probably just burned out. I'll replace it tomorrow. And as for the smell, it's an old house. Basements have smells. It's probably just the furnace oil or something." "But Maya was so specific. She said the breathing wall." "Chloe." Ben's voice was gentle but firm. "Maya is 6 years old. She has an imaginary friend who apparently gives her architecture advice. I love our daughter's imagination, but we can't start making household decisions based on what her invisible friend tells her. That's not rational." Chloe knew he was right. Of course he was right. Ben was always right about these things. She was letting her exhaustion and her daughter's vivid imagination cloud her judgment. "You're right," she said. "I'm just tired. It's been a long day." "Go to bed," Ben said, turning back to his computer. "I'll check the basement tomorrow in the daylight, replace the bulb, and we'll see if there's anything to worry about." Which there won't be. Chloe nodded and left the office. She climbed the stairs back to the second floor, checked on Maya one more time. Her daughter was already asleep, breathing softly, her small hand curled around her stuffed rabbit, and then went to her own bedroom. Ben joined her 20 minutes later, and they both settled into bed. But Chloe couldn't sleep. She lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the house around her. That smell kept coming back to her, sweet and wrong. And Maya's words echoed in her mind. The breathing wall is making a funny smell. What if Maya was right? What if there really was something wrong in the basement? But that was ridiculous. Maya was 6. Nathaniel was imaginary. Ben was the engineer, the expert. He had said everything was fine. Chloe closed her eyes and tried to let sleep take her. She had almost succeeded, hovering on that edge between wakefulness and dreams, when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Small footsteps. A moment later, her bedroom door opened and Maya appeared, silhouetted against the hallway light. "Mommy!" Her voice was small and frightened. Chloe sat up immediately, her mother's instinct overriding her exhaustion. "What's wrong, baby? Did you have a bad dream?" Maya walked to the side of the bed, and even in the dim light, Chloe could see tears streaming down her daughter's face. "Mommy, Nathaniel is really scared. He says we have to leave the house right now. He says the breathing wall is going to explode. He says if we don't go right now, we're all going to die." The way Maya said it, with such absolute conviction and terror, sent ice through Chloe's veins. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't a game. Her daughter was genuinely terrified. Ben stirred beside her. "What's going on?" "Maya says we need to leave the house," Chloe said, her voice surprisingly steady. Ben groaned and rolled over. "Chloe, it's the middle of the night. Maya had a nightmare. Bring her back to bed." But Chloe was looking at her daughter's face, at the fear there, at the certainty. And suddenly, with a clarity that felt like cold water splashing over her, she understood. It didn't matter if Nathaniel was real or imaginary. It didn't matter if Ben thought she was being irrational. What mattered was that her daughter was terrified, and every instinct Chloe had was screaming at her that something was wrong. Mothers know. Somehow they just know. "Ben, get up," Chloe said, throwing back the covers. "What, Chloe? You can't be serious. Get up right now. We're leaving the house." The tone in her voice must have finally broken through his sleepy irritation, because Ben sat up, blinking in confusion. "You're serious? You're seriously going to evacuate our house in the middle of the night, because our 6-year-old's imaginary friend said so?" "Yes," Chloe said simply. She was already pulling on a sweatshirt over her pajamas, her hands moving with a speed and purpose that surprised her. "Maya, go get your shoes and your jacket. Right now, baby. Fast as you can." Maya ran from the room. Ben was staring at his wife as if she had lost her mind. "Chloe, this is insane. There's nothing wrong with the house. You're feeding into her fantasy. You're—" "Ben Morrison, I have never asked you for anything like this in our entire marriage. I am asking you now. Please, please trust me. Get dressed and come outside with us. If I'm wrong, you can tell me I'm crazy for the rest of our lives. But please, please just come with us. Now." Something in her voice, some primal urgency that cut through all rational thought, finally reached him. Ben's face changed. He got out of bed. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." They moved quickly after that. Ben grabbed his phone and wallet. Chloe found Maya in her room, putting on her sneakers with shaking hands. They didn't pack anything. They didn't stop to think. They just moved, driven by an instinct older than logic, older than reason. As they rushed down the stairs, Maya suddenly stopped. "Wait, my drawing." "Maya, we don't have time," Chloe began, but Maya had already darted back up the stairs. She returned seconds later, clutching a piece of paper, a child's crayon drawing that she had made earlier that week. It showed a little girl holding hands with a tall golden figure with what looked like wings. They reached the front door. Chloe's hand was on the doorknob when Ben suddenly grabbed her arm. "Wait," he said. "If there really is a gas leak, we shouldn't turn on any lights, use any electronics, and we shouldn't even use the door. The friction might cause a spark." Chloe's blood ran cold. A gas leak. That's what the sweet chemical smell was. Natural gas, with its distinctive odor added for safety. The breathing wall, the wall where the gas line ran, a crack in the pipe slowly filling their basement with explosive gas. "The window," Ben said, pointing to the large picture window in the living room. Carefully, they moved to the window. Ben unlocked it and slowly, carefully slid it open. The cool night air rushed in, fresh and clean. One by one, they climbed through. Ben first, then Maya, then Chloe. They had just reached the lawn, 20 feet from the house, when it happened. The furnace in the basement, running on its automatic timer, kicked on for its programmed nightly cycle. The electronic igniter sparked. The explosion was massive, a blooming fireball that seemed to swallow their entire house in an instant. The force of it knocked all three of them to the ground. Chloe instinctively covered Maya's body with her own, feeling the wave of heat wash over them. Glass shattered, wood splintered. The night filled with the roar of destruction. And then, almost as quickly as it had begun, it was over. Chloe lifted her head, her ears ringing, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Their house, their beautiful, ordinary home, was engulfed in flames. Fire licked out of every window. The roof had partially collapsed. If they had been inside, if they had been sleeping in their beds just minutes ago, they would all be dead. "Mommy, look," Maya whispered. Chloe turned to see what her daughter was pointing at. Above the burning house, silhouetted against the orange flames and the dark night sky, was a figure. It was tall and unmistakably human in shape, but it seemed to be made of pure golden light, radiant and beautiful and impossible. Even as Chloe watched, even as her rational mind tried to reject what her eyes were seeing, the figure spread what could only be described as wings, vast and luminous, and began to rise into the sky. Beside her, Ben made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. The figure rose higher and higher, until it was just a point of light among the stars, and then it was gone. "Nathaniel," Maya said softly, tears streaming down her face. "He's going back to the sunshine. He said goodbye. He said he was glad we listened." Chloe gathered her daughter into her arms, holding her tight. Over Maya's shoulder she looked at Ben. Her husband's face was pale, his eyes wide, all his rational certainty shattered. He had seen it too. They had both seen it. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Neighbors were emerging from their houses, calling out, asking if everyone was okay. But Chloe barely heard them. She just held her daughter and looked at the burning remains of their home, and she understood with absolute certainty that they had just witnessed a miracle. In the days that followed, investigators confirmed what Ben had already suspected. A crack in the gas line behind the basement wall had been slowly leaking natural gas into their home for weeks, possibly months. The concentration had reached dangerous levels that night. If the family had been inside when the furnace ignited, they would have died instantly. The investigators called it a tragedy narrowly avoided through dumb luck and good timing, but the Morrison family knew better. Chloe, Ben and Maya stayed with Chloe's sister for the first week, while they sorted through insurance claims and tried to process what had happened. The transition was jarring. One day they had a home full of possessions, memories, all the accumulated stuff of a normal life. The next day they had nothing but the clothes they had worn that night and each other, but they were alive. Ben was changed by the experience in a profound way. The man who had lived his entire life by logic and reason, who had built his career on the predictable laws of physics and mathematics, had seen something that defied every rational explanation. It humbled him. It opened him. He became softer, more willing to listen, more ready to accept that there were things in the universe that couldn't be measured or calculated. "I saw it," he told Chloe one night, as they lay in the guest room at her sister's house. "I saw him, Nathaniel, or whatever he was. I can't explain it, it shouldn't be possible, but I saw him." "I know," Chloe said simply. "I saw him too." But it was Maya who seemed least affected by the trauma. She had lost her home, her toys, her room, everything familiar, but she seemed almost peaceful, as if a weight had been lifted from her small shoulders. When Chloe asked her about it, Maya just smiled. "Nathaniel said it would be okay. He said we needed to lose the house to learn something important. He said sometimes angels have to break things to fix what's really broken inside." Chloe didn't fully understand what her daughter meant, but she felt the truth of it. Losing their home had been devastating, but it had also stripped away everything that wasn't essential. What remained, the three of them together and alive, was what truly mattered. As the weeks turned into months, the Morrison family began to rebuild their lives. The insurance payout allowed them to start over, to find a new home. But something had fundamentally changed in how they lived. They were more present with each other. They listened more carefully. Ben came home from work at reasonable hours. Chloe stopped trying to control every detail and learned to trust her intuition, and they both always listened to Maya. One evening, about 2 months after the explosion, Maya was drawing at the kitchen table in their new apartment. Chloe was making dinner, and Ben was reading the newspaper. It was a scene of such ordinary domesticity that it almost felt surreal after everything they had been through. "Mommy," Maya said, "I'm going to miss Nathaniel." Chloe set down the wooden spoon she had been using and came to sit beside her daughter. "Has he gone away, sweetie?" Maya nodded. "He said his job was done. He said he had to go help other people now. But he said he would always be watching over us, even if I can't see him anymore. Chloe felt tears prick her eyes. She pulled Maya into her lap. I'm glad he was here when we needed him, and I'm sorry I didn't listen to you sooner. It's okay, Mommy. Nathaniel said grown-ups have a hard time seeing what's really there. He said their eyes get tired from looking at all the boring stuff, so they forget how to see the magical stuff. Out of the mouths of babes, Chloe thought. That night, after Maya was in bed, Chloe sat down at her laptop with a strange sense of purpose. She opened a blank document and began to type. The words flowed out of her faster than she had ever written anything in her life. She wrote about a little girl named Lily, who had an imaginary friend named Gabriel. She wrote about how Gabriel saved Lily's family by warning them of danger. She wrote about the importance of listening, really listening, to the quiet voices we often dismiss. She called the story Nathaniel Says to Listen. Ben found her there hours later, still typing, tears streaming down her face. What are you doing? He asked gently. I'm writing it down, Chloe said. Everything that happened. I'm turning it into a story for children, so that other parents will listen when their kids tell them something important, so that Maya will always remember that her voice matters, that she saved us all. Ben read over her shoulder for a few minutes, then kissed the top of her head. It's beautiful, finish it. Chloe did finish it. It took her 3 months, writing late at night after Maya was asleep, pouring all her fear and gratitude and awe into every word. When it was done, she wasn't sure what to do with it. She wasn't a professional writer. She didn't know anything about publishing. But she sent the manuscript to a dozen literary agents anyway, hoping that somehow someone would understand what she was trying to say. To her shock, she got 5 offers of representation. The agent she chose, a kind woman named Sandra, who had lost her own son years before and believed deeply in signs from the divine, sold the book in a 2-book deal to a major publisher within 3 weeks. Nathaniel Says to Listen was published the following spring. The cover showed a little girl holding hands with a figure made of golden light. The dedication read, For Maya, who taught me to listen, and for Nathaniel, whoever or whatever you were. Thank you. The book became a quiet sensation. It started with a review in a major parenting magazine, then word of mouth spread. Parents began sharing it with each other, talking about how it had changed the way they listened to their children. Teachers used it in classrooms. Therapists recommended it to families. Within 6 months it had sold over 100,000 copies. But more than the sales, it was the letters that moved Chloe. Letters from parents who said they had started really hearing what their children were trying to tell them. Letters from people who had experienced their own unexplained moments of grace. Letters from those who had lost their faith and found it again in the pages of a simple children's story. One letter in particular stayed with Chloe. It was from a mother in Ohio whose young son had insisted that his friend told him not to get in the car with his father one morning. The mother had been divorced, and it was the father's custody day. She had ignored her son's pleas until he started screaming and crying. Finally, frustrated and afraid something was seriously wrong, she kept her son home and called the father to reschedule. The father, it turned out, had been drinking. He was pulled over for drunk driving just 2 miles from her house. If her son had been in the car, it could have ended in tragedy. I had just read your book the night before, the mother wrote. It made me listen to my son in a way I hadn't before. You saved my child by teaching me to hear him. Thank you. Chloe kept that letter in a special box, along with the drawing Maya had grabbed that night as they fled their burning home. The drawing showed a little girl and a tall golden figure with wings, holding hands and smiling. A year after the book's publication, the Morrison family was invited to speak at a conference on faith and family. Chloe was nervous. She wasn't a speaker. She was just a mother who had been given a gift, a warning, and she had been wise enough to listen at the last possible moment. But when she walked onto that stage, with Ben and Maya beside her, and she looked out at the audience of hundreds of people, she felt a familiar warmth. For just a moment, she could have sworn she saw a tall figure of golden light standing at the back of the auditorium, watching them with what could only be described as pride. She blinked, and it was gone, but the warmth remained. Chloe told their story that day, every detail, holding nothing back. She talked about her skepticism, her exhaustion, her dismissal of her daughter's warnings. She talked about that final moment when she had to choose between reason and instinct, between what made sense and what felt true. And she talked about the miracle they had witnessed, the angel disguised as an imaginary friend who had saved their lives. When she finished, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the entire auditorium rose to their feet in applause, and Chloe saw that many of them were crying. After the conference, a woman approached them, clutching a copy of Chloe's book. She was elderly, with kind eyes and hands that shook slightly as she held out the book for Chloe to sign. "Thank you," the woman said softly. "Thank you for having the courage to tell the truth about what you saw. My husband died 3 years ago, and the night he passed, I saw him. Not imagined him, not dreamed him. I saw him standing at the foot of our bed, surrounded by light, telling me he was okay and that he loved me. I told my children, and they said it was grief, that I was hallucinating. I started to believe them. I started to think I was crazy. But your story reminded me that I'm not crazy, that what I saw was real, that there are more things in heaven and earth than we can understand. You gave me permission to believe my own experience again. You have no idea what a gift that is." Chloe signed the woman's book with tears in her eyes, and then she hugged her. This stranger, who was not a stranger at all, but someone who had also stood at the veil between worlds and seen through. That was the moment Chloe truly understood the purpose of what had happened to them. It wasn't just about their family being saved, although that was miracle enough. It was about giving voice to the voiceless, giving permission to doubt the doubt, giving courage to those who had experienced the inexplicable but had been told by a rational world to deny what they knew to be true. The years passed. Maya grew from a little girl into a thoughtful teenager who still remembered Nathaniel with fondness and gratitude. She wanted to be a child psychologist, she said, someone who would always take children seriously, who would always listen. Ben advanced in his career, but he did so with a new humility and openness. He joined a weekly discussion group on science and faith, trying to find ways to reconcile the rational world he had always trusted with the miraculous experience he could never deny. And Chloe continued to write. She wrote more children's books, each one exploring the ways that the divine intersected with the everyday, the ways that grace appeared in ordinary moments. But none of her other books had the impact of that first one, Nathaniel Says to Listen. That book had a life of its own, continuing to find its way to the people who needed it most. On the 5-year anniversary of the night their house had exploded, the Morrison family returned to the empty lot where their old home had stood. The lot had never been rebuilt. The owners had sold it, and it had changed hands several times, but no one had ever constructed anything on it. It sat empty, a small square of grass in the middle of a suburban neighborhood. They stood together, the three of them, looking at the space where their old life had ended and their new life had begun. "Do you ever regret it?" Ben asked Chloe quietly. "Losing the house, everything we had?" Chloe thought about it seriously. "No," she said finally. "We lost things, objects, stuff that could be replaced. But we gained something so much more valuable. We gained proof that we're not alone in this universe. We gained faith. We gained each other in a deeper way. I'd make the same choice again." Maya, now 11 years old and wise beyond her years, spoke up. "Nathaniel told me once that sometimes God has to turn our lives upside down so we can see them right side up. I think that's what happened to us." As they turned to leave, Chloe could have sworn she felt a warm hand on her shoulder, just for a moment, there and then gone. She turned expecting to see nothing, but instead she saw something that made her heart leap. There, growing in the middle of the empty lot where their house had stood, was a single flower. It was a sunflower, golden and radiant, turning its face toward the sky. There had been no sunflowers on this lot before. The ground had been scraped bare after the fire, and no one had planted anything. But there it was, impossible and beautiful, standing tall and bright in the afternoon sun. Maya saw it too. She walked over to the flower and knelt beside it, touching the petals gently. "Thank you, Nathaniel," she whispered. "I hope you're helping lots of other people now. I hope they listen to you better than we did at first." The sunflower swayed in a breeze that neither Chloe nor Ben could feel, as if waving goodbye. They left it there, that miraculous flower, growing in the ashes of their old life, a reminder that beauty and grace could spring from the most unlikely places, that messages from heaven could come through the voices of children, and that angels walked among us disguised as imaginary friends, waiting patiently for someone brave enough to listen. So what would you do if a message from the heavens came through the voice of a child? Would you dismiss it as fantasy, as imagination, as the ramblings of an overactive young mind? Or would you lean in? Would you listen? Would you trust that children often see truths that adults have trained themselves to ignore? The Morrison family learned the hard way that the most important messages often come from the most unexpected messengers. They learned that faith sometimes requires us to look foolish in the eyes of the rational world. They learned that mother's intuition is real, that children's wisdom is profound, and that angels are all around us if we would only have the courage to see them. Their story is a testament to the power of listening, of trusting, of believing in things that cannot be proven but can be experienced. It's a reminder that we live in a universe far more mysterious and benevolent than we often allow ourselves to imagine. I want you to think about the people in your life who might be carrying messages you need to hear. Your children, perhaps, or your elderly parents, or that friend who always seems to know when something is wrong before you tell them. What if they're not just lucky or perceptive? What if they're tuned into a frequency that most of us have forgotten how to hear? The Morrisons didn't believe until belief was forced upon them in the most dramatic way possible. But it doesn't have to be that way for you. You can choose to listen now today before the crisis comes. You can choose to trust the quiet whispers, the gentle warnings, the small voices that speak truth in a world of noise. Tell me in the comments right now about a time when you or someone you know experienced something that couldn't be explained rationally. Tell me about the moments when you knew, just knew, something that you couldn't possibly know through normal means. Share your city so we can see how far across the world these experiences reach. Because I promise you, you're not alone. There are millions of us who have stood at the intersection of the mundane and the miraculous, who have witnessed things that defy explanation, who have been touched by grace in ways both subtle and profound. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you to listen more carefully to the voices around you and within you, then I need you to do 3 things right now. First, subscribe to this channel. We share stories like this every week, stories of hope, of miracles, of the ways that the divine touches our everyday lives. By subscribing, you ensure that you won't miss the next story that might change your perspective or even save your life. Second, hit that share button and send this video to someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a parent who's struggling to connect with their child. Maybe it's a friend who's lost their faith and needs a reminder that miracles still happen. Maybe it's someone who's dismissed their own inexplicable experiences because the world told them to stop believing. Whoever it is, share this story with them. Let it be your gift to them, a reminder that we live in a universe of wonder. And third, leave a comment. Don't just watch and disappear into the endless scroll of content. Stop for a moment and connect with this community of believers, seekers, and witnesses. Tell us your story. Tell us what this meant to you. Tell us if you've ever had a Nathaniel in your life, by whatever name or form they took. Your story matters. Your experience matters. And by sharing it, you might be the one who helps someone else believe again. The Morrison family's story didn't end with the explosion and the golden figure rising into the night sky. In many ways, that's where their real story began. That's when they truly started living, with eyes wide open to the magic that surrounds us, with ears attuned to the whispers of grace, with hearts brave enough to believe in things they couldn't touch or measure or prove. Years after the incident, Chloe was invited to speak at a children's hospital, reading her book to young patients who were fighting battles far harder than anything she had faced. One little boy, no more than 7 years old, bald from chemotherapy and thin as a whisper, raised his hand after she finished reading. "I have a friend like Nathaniel," he said, his voice soft but certain. "His name is Michael. He sits with me during the treatments when they hurt. He tells me stories about flying. Nobody else can see him, but I know he's real. Is that okay?" Chloe felt her throat tighten with emotion. She knelt down beside the boy's bed, looking into his eyes, those ancient eyes in a child's face, eyes that had seen too much pain and yet still held light. "It's more than okay," she told him. "It's a gift. Michael is there because you need him, and you should listen to everything he tells you. He's helping you be brave." The boy smiled, and for a moment Chloe could have sworn she saw a shimmer in the air beside his bed, a presence of pure light and love, standing guard over this small warrior. That encounter stayed with Chloe for years. It crystallized something she had been slowly understanding. Nathaniel hadn't just saved her family from a gas explosion, he had saved them from a different kind of death, the slow death of cynicism, of disconnection, of going through life with their eyes closed to wonder. He had cracked them open, and through that crack light had poured in. She wrote about this in her journal that night. "We think miracles are about the big moments, the dramatic rescues, the undeniable interventions. But maybe the real miracle is what happens after. Maybe the real miracle is the way we're changed, the way we learn to live with our eyes open, the way we become people who can recognize grace when it appears. Maybe surviving the explosion was just the beginning. Maybe learning to live in wonder, to listen deeply, to trust the inexplicable, that's the real miracle. And it's a miracle we have to choose every single day. The Morrison family did choose it. Every single day. They chose to live as people who had been touched by the divine and could never forget it. They chose to be the kind of family that listened to each other, really listened, with patience and openness, and the willingness to believe that truth could come from unexpected sources. When Maya was 16, she came home from school one day with a troubled expression. Over dinner, she was quiet, pushing her food around her plate. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Chloe asked. Maya hesitated, then looked up at her parents. "There's this girl at school, Emma. She's been really weird lately, saying strange things, giving away her stuff. Today she told me goodbye, like really goodbye, like she wouldn't see me again. And I have this feeling, this really bad feeling, like something's wrong." Ben and Chloe exchanged a glance. The old Ben would have dismissed teenage drama, but this Ben, the one who had been remade by miracle, knew better. "What's your intuition telling you?" he asked his daughter. "I think she's planning to hurt herself," Maya whispered. "I think she's saying goodbye because she's planning to die." "Then we listen to that," Chloe said immediately. "We trust that feeling." "What's Emma's last name?" They called Emma's parents that night. It was an awkward, difficult conversation. Emma's mother was defensive at first, insisting that Maya must be mistaken, but Chloe persisted, gently but firmly, sharing her own story, explaining why she had learned never to dismiss these intuitions, these warnings that come from a place deeper than logic. Emma's mother agreed to check on her daughter. What she found in Emma's room was a goodbye note and a bottle of pills. Emma was hospitalized that night and got the help she needed. The crisis was averted because one teenage girl had listened to her instinct, and because her parents had taught her that such instincts were not to be dismissed. When Emma returned to school weeks later, healthier and beginning to heal, she sought out Maya in the hallway. "Thank you," she said simply. "You saved my life." Maya hugged her, tears in both their eyes. "I learned from someone else who saved lives by listening," she said. "His name was Nathaniel." These ripples of grace, spreading out from one miraculous night, touching life after life, that was perhaps the greatest miracle of all. The Morrison family had become agents of the same divine intervention that had once saved them. They had learned to be Nathaniels for others, to listen, to warn, to care, to take seriously the quiet voices that speak truth in a noisy world. Chloe's book continued to find new readers year after year. It was translated into 37 languages. It was adapted into a short film that won awards at faith-based film festivals. But more important than any of that, it became a touchstone for families learning to communicate, for parents learning to honor their children's perceptions, for anyone who had ever felt dismissed or unheard. On what would have been the 10th anniversary of the explosion, the Morrison family received a letter that moved them profoundly. It was from a firefighter who had been one of the first responders to their house that night. He wrote, "I've been a firefighter for 23 years. I've seen a lot of tragedy, a lot of close calls, but I've never seen anything like what happened at your house. We arrived expecting to find bodies. The explosion was that catastrophic. When we found out you had all escaped literally minutes before, I knew it was impossible. Nobody's timing is that perfect. Nobody's luck is that good. I've thought about your family every year on this date, wondering how you knew to get out. I just read your wife's book, and now I understand. I'm not a religious man, but I believe in what I saw that night. I believe you were protected by something beyond explanation, and I believe your story needed to be told, because people need to know that we're not alone in this universe. Thank you for having the courage to share your truth." Ben framed that letter and hung it in his office. It was a reminder on the hard days when doubt crept in, on the ordinary days when the miraculous seemed far away, that what they had experienced was real. They had been saved. They had been changed. And their story had the power to change others. As Maya approached her high school graduation, she was asked to give a speech to her class. She spent weeks working on it, wanting to get it just right. On the day of graduation, she stood at the podium in her cap and gown, looking out at her classmates and their families, and she began to speak. "We're told that growing up means putting away childish things," she said. "We're told to be rational, logical, to trust only what can be proven and measured, and those things have their place. But I want to tell you about something I learned when I was 6 years old, something that saved my life and my family, and taught me the most important lesson I'll ever learn." She told them about Nathaniel. She told them about the warnings, the breathing wall, the explosion, the golden figure rising into the sky. She told them about learning to listen, to trust, to believe in things larger than logic. "I'm going to college in the fall to study psychology," she concluded. "And I'm going to spend my life helping people, especially children, be heard, because the most dangerous thing in this world isn't evil. It's dismissal. It's the refusal to listen. It's the arrogance of thinking we know better than the quiet voices of wisdom that speak to us from sources we can't see or understand. So my challenge to all of you, as we leave this place and go out into the world, is this. Listen, really listen, to the children in your life, to the elderly, to your own intuition, to that small voice inside that knows things your rational mind cannot explain. Listen to the Nathaniels of this world, by whatever name they come, because they might just save your life. And even if they don't, they'll teach you to live in wonder, and that's its own kind of salvation." The auditorium was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. Many parents were crying. Many students looked shaken, moved, awakened to possibilities they had never considered. After the ceremony, an elderly woman approached Maya. She was someone's grandmother, dressed elegantly, with eyes that sparkled with unshed tears. "Thank you, dear child," she said, taking Maya's hand. "I lost my grandson 3 years ago. He was only 12. But before he died, he told me about his friend, someone only he could see, who came to help him not be afraid. I thought it was the morphine, his mind trying to cope with the pain. But you've helped me understand. He wasn't alone. Someone was with him, easing his transition. That's a gift you've given me today, and I'll treasure it for the rest of my life." Maya hugged this stranger, who was not a stranger, and she understood that Nathaniel's miracle kept spreading, kept touching lives, kept opening hearts to the possibility that we are all held, all watched over, all loved by forces we can barely comprehend. That summer, before Maya left for college, the family took a trip together. They went to the mountains, to a place of stunning natural beauty where the evidence of the divine seemed impossible to deny. They hiked to a ridge overlooking a valley filled with wildflowers, and they sat together, the three of them, in the golden afternoon light. "I want to thank you both," Maya said suddenly, "for believing me, for listening. I know it wasn't easy, especially at first, but you chose to trust me over your own certainty, and that choice saved us. I'll never forget that. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure other children are listened to the way you learned to listen to me." Chloe reached for her daughter's hand on one side and her husband's on the other. They sat connected, this family that had been broken open and remade, looking out over a valley that seemed to pulse with life and light. "I see him, you know," Maya said softly. "Sometimes I still see him, Nathaniel, not like before, not as clearly. But when someone really needs help, when there's a moment of real danger or real despair, I see a shimmer, a golden outline, and I know he's still there, still watching, still helping. We're all being looked after all the time. We just forget to notice." Ben, the engineer who had learned to believe in things he couldn't measure, spoke. "I spent so many years thinking the universe was cold, mechanistic, indifferent. I thought we were just accidents of chemistry spinning through an uncaring void. But I was wrong. The universe is alive with intention, with care, with love. We're not accidents. We're not alone. And the fact that we can't always see or understand the help that surrounds us doesn't make it any less real." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, a warm breeze swept across the ridge. It smelled of pine and wildflowers and something else, something sweet and indefinable, something that reminded Chloe of that night so many years ago when she had stood in her hallway and felt a presence behind her, trying to get her attention, trying to save her. "Thank you," she whispered to the wind, to the sky, to whatever force had sent Nathaniel to her family. "Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for finding a way to reach us. Thank you for teaching us to live awake." The three of them sat in silence as the stars began to appear, one by one like distant beacons of hope scattered across the darkness. And for just a moment, just a heartbeat, they all saw it, a figure of golden light, standing at the edge of the ridge, wings spread wide, watching over them with infinite tenderness. Then it faded, melting into the twilight, but the feeling it left behind remained. Peace, assurance, love. They were not alone. They had never been alone, and they never would be. This is the true story of the Morrison family and their encounter with the divine in the form of a little girl's imaginary friend. It's a story about the courage to listen, the humility to believe, and the transformation that comes when we open ourselves to grace. It's a story about second chances, about the way love finds us even when we're not looking for it, about the angels who walk beside us disguised as ordinary things, waiting patiently for us to recognize them. So I'll ask you one final time, what would you do if a message from the heavens came through the voice of a child? The Morrison family knows the answer. They listened, and it saved their lives. They believed, and it transformed their world. They shared their story, and it has touched countless others. Now it's your turn. Leave your comment, share your story, subscribe to this journey of faith and wonder, and most importantly, go out into your life and listen, really listen, to the children, to the quiet voices, to your own deep intuition, to the Nathaniels who speak in whispers, trying to guide us home. Because in the end, that's what all these stories are about. They're about finding our way home to truth, to love, to the understanding that we are cherished beyond measure by a universe that knows our names and sends help in the forms we can most easily receive it. The Morrisons found their way home through fire and fear and faith. Their house burned, but they were refined. They lost everything, but they gained what matters most. They were broken open, and through that crack, the light got in. May you be so blessed. May you listen so well. May you recognize your own Nathaniel when he appears, in whatever form he takes. And may you have the courage to trust even when trust seems foolish, even when the rational world tells you to dismiss what you know in your heart to be true. This is the message. This is the miracle. This is the echo of hope that reverberates through every life touched by grace. Listen, just listen. The angels are speaking.